Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. And today I'm here to share with you 5 things I've noticed coaching below platinum clients inside my mid-lane school program, and hopefully get across to you guys 5 pragmatic pieces of advice that you guys can actually go ahead and execute in your own journey while trying to reach platinum. So the first interesting observation that I've noticed is that players tend to overestimate their ability to play difficult champions. Now, I want to be very clear here. In the mid-lane school, we have a very unique way of approaching the learning journey, and we do this through the lens of MLS approved champions. Now, essentially what MLS approved champions are a series of champions that we deem to be a healthy or effective way to teach the game. Now, we have guides and content for each of these champions inside the program. Some of these are very, very simple mages, such as Veigar, Lux, Seraphine, Malzahar. We have a little bit more complicated mages, such as Syndra, Orianna, and Victor. We have assassins in both ends of the spectrum. We have something for everyone. But what I've noticed is that people are drawn to the most complicated champion inside the mid lane school, which is Syndra. And I always think to myself, why is that the case? Why, out of all of these beautifully simple champions, people would prefer to make their journey as difficult as possible? Now, look, that is a fascinating question. I don't necessarily have the answer to that. I'm sure you guys might have some rough hypotheses. If you do, that's great. Share them with me inside the comment section. But where I'd rather direct my attention for this video is what makes up the difficulty of a champion. Like, what makes one champion quite difficult and maybe another champ not so much? This is actually something that I haven't done a great job of explaining, or I guess clarifying, inside my program, and I want to take the time to do so now. So I've noticed that difficulty can be gauged through 3 factors. The first one, and the most obvious, is mechanical execution. How difficult is it to get your damage down and to fulfill your champ's identity from a mechanical aspect? We think of champions like Syndra that require a lot of spacing and tethering and skill shots, and you compare that to maybe like a Galio. There's a night and day difference in terms of mechanical execution. That's something we all understand. That's not overly complicated. The second, which is way more significant, is actually reference point clarity. What does our champion want to do, and how clear is this to us? How obvious is it to us what our champion wants to do? Syndra, for example, wants to win via small wins, small micro advantages, scaling beautifully into the mid game through great positioning, ability usage, and being a nuisance in fights. This is done through a series of small things done well. Winning games like this is not really as obvious or as clear as maybe other champions might. When you try to visualize, how do I win a game as Syndra? Is that really clear? Do you know exactly kind of what you need to do and what it's going to look like? Probably not, because Syndra is, again, a champion that revolves around a lot of small things. Let's compare this to something like an Echo. An Echo has very clear trading patterns. Your trading patterns have immediate effects onto your lane phase because of the amount of damage, right? You can take those EQ auto trades, proc your passive, you can abuse your low E cooldown, and as soon as we get to level 7 and 8, you're one-shotting the waves, hovering sides, complementing your team, getting into the side lane. We've got these very clear reference points that you can kind of follow, and you can easily visualize, what do I need to do as an Echo to win this game? And so I think that a lot of people, or I would say a lot of people, get value from playing champions that have these very clear, straightforward reference points. Clarity of reference points is a huge determining factor of what makes up my MLS approved champions. Hence why we have champions like Naafiri, Lux, Seraphine, Malzahar, Veigar, etc., etc. All these champions have extremely clear reference points, and that will simplify the hell out of your journey. The third factor, and this is actually something that was relatively new to me and something that I didn't understand that well until probably a year into my program, which is skirmish difficulty. Okay, now a champion that I actually recently removed from the MLS was Diana, because I actually thought that she was simple. I thought she had reference point clarity and mechanical execution, I guess, simplicity. But in reality, this third factor, she is really unforgiving. She's very unforgiving in the way she skirmishes. So rather than talk about it, let's take a look at an example here. So this was actually a clip from Peckinwolf playing Diana, and I thought this was such a beautiful clip to highlight exactly the problems that my clients were facing with Diana. Right, so this is a classic 17-minute skirmish. We have ultimate coming up in 2 seconds. He's kind of getting collapsed on here, peels back beautifully, Nocturne dives in, and notice how he didn't feel scared. He didn't feel like he could go in, right? If we kind of go back here, he doesn't know when he should go in because Heimerdinger is holding the CC. He knows he doesn't have flash here. if he goes in, he's going to die. He waits for Heimerdinger to use it, but he doesn't want to go in too early because then he can't one-shot. And so he's really unsure about how to navigate the fight. And these are scenarios that are super common with Diana, whereas you don't have that obvious go in, get the one-shot, they all explode and happy chappy walk away. Oftentimes you're going to be faced with these awkward scenarios where you're really unsure, do I go in? Because if I do in, how the hell do I get out? Now, in this case, he didn't have access to Phase Rush. He'd already used it. If he had Phase Rush, maybe that would be a little bit easier. But, if I'm talking to a bronze or a silver client and we're trying to min-max Phase Rush and we're trying to kind of go in, get out, and trying to find those perfect engage windows, more often than not, they're going to be very overwhelmed. And as Diana, you need to have this flexible approach to fighting. Sometimes you do have to wait off to the side and be very, very patient. Sometimes you are going to go for that AoE functionality here and try and get the max damage with your R. Sometimes you're going to be sitting off to the side and pick the singular target. Diana, as a Diana player, your ability to skirmish scales with game understanding. And there's a lot of anticipation that needs to be developed. We compare this with other simple champions, which we'll get to in a second, and they don't really have this problem. Now, if all of your Diana situations look like this, right, where you've got a very El Clasico 2v3 man advantage, they're very squishy, have no threat, boom, stock standard. If all of our Diana plays looked like this, great, thumbs up, you'll be rock and rolling, smooth sailing. More often than not, though, you'll get plays like that Peckenwolf situation where you're really unsure about if I should go in. If I go in, I'm going to die. I'm very kind of committal in my nature. And this really made skirmishing and reviewing skirmishing and kind of understanding what's going wrong quite difficult for a lot of my clients inside the Midland School program. Now, I want to reiterate here, I do think Diana has clear reference points at a high level. Understanding what to do with her macro-wise isn't overly difficult, so she ticks box number 2. I think her mechanical execution isn't overly difficult in terms of dealing damage, right? Like, I can go in and press my Q, press my W, press my E and R. That's not very hard. Any bronze player, iron player, silver player can do that. But due to the third factor, that how difficult fighting is for her and how unforgiving it actually is, that really made it such that Diana just wasn't feasible for the MLS program. What I found was because of how difficult this third factor was, many people in the program had to play upwards of 150 to 200 games with Diana just to get, somewhat okay results. And I never understood why. I'm like, why was it taking so long? I was only gauging difficulty through those first 2 factors. I never considered this third one. And thinking now in hindsight about like kind of what I know now, and why so many people were getting success with champions like Naafiri or even Echo, right? These are champions that can scrap, they can skirmish, they can get involved, deal their damage. But they still can escape if they accidentally overcommit. Not to mention that the way they deal their damage and the way they can maneuver around is much simpler. Having that room for error in your skirmishing, in my experience, is actually very important for simplifying the journey and just making it a much more enjoyable journey. And now you may ask, well, what do you mean Naafiri and Echo and Galio have more room for error? Well, think about Naafiri. If you go in and they flash away, you've still got the movement speed from your R to run away and reposition. You're so fast, you're so mobile, or you say you do get the reset, you're not committed onto the next target. With Echo, you have your W and your R. With Galio, you're so tanky a lot of the time with your Aftershock. You've got the hardcore CC, you're building Zhonya's a lot of the time. There's a lot of ways you can kind of circumvent that as well. And so overall, this has been a massive breakthrough in kind of the way, my learnings inside the Midland School program. So what is my advice here then, guys? I'm not here to say that everyone should play super simple champions in regards to all 3 of these factors. But for people who are very new to the game and are definitely in iron and bronze and maybe even low silver, I would strongly recommend those easier to execute champions, especially in reference to the second point, which is that reference point clarity. So the second interesting observation is that people in these elo brackets love rushing abilities. As soon as they see the enemy and they walk into a situation, they're gonna use their key ability straight away, no hesitation. The idea of holding an ability, being a little bit more patient with your abilities, is actually just very, very rare. The majority of the clients that I work with in this elo bracket have a problem with rushing abilities. So let's actually dive into a clip. So this was from a random MLS client, and I was actually going through this VOD with him. And as I was going through his gameplay, he had this awful habit of just throwing out E's. As soon as he saw the enemy, not holding it, just throwing out E's. And as a result, he had a really big problem with landing E's. Now look at this situation here. The millisecond that he came out of vision, instantaneously used his E. Now this isn't just I guess, prevalent with Swain players. It's the same thing with Veigar and their E's, Lux and their Q's, Seraphine and their Q's or E's. Name any MLS approved champion, they're rushing their core ability. So given the prevalence of people rushing their abilities and not holding their abilities, what would I suggest? How would you suggest fixing this? Well, what I would do is actually pick one ability within your kit. You know, ideally a key ability, again, Veigar Cage, Lux Q, Swain E, Galio R, whatever the hell it might be, right? And focus hardcore on holding that ability, just being a little bit more patient and poised with that ability. This would be, you would have an in-game component here, right? You'd be really allocating mental stack towards this. And then in your post-game review, you'd be going over your major skirmishes with an emphasis on how did you use that ability? Were you patient with that specific ability? Now, you're not going to be able to do this for many abilities at a time, so please take your time. One ability on your main champion. This will do wonders for your skirmishing and overall just fighting competence. Now, the third interesting observation is that I feel like the vibe I get from a lot of my clients inside the MLS is that if there is a very champ-specific piece of information or learning, that they don't really feel satisfied. They feel like they want something more. Now, rather than talking about it, I want to show you exactly what I mean. This was from a Silver 1 Victor player, right? He wasn't familiar with Silas's, I guess, strength and, didn't really understand the matchup. He stands his ground, level 2, gets absolutely annihilated by the Silas and has to blow flash and basically nearly gets solo killed at level 2. And, when I was getting into the review with him here, I'm like, well, great. You don't know what you don't know. You need to be very conservative in terms of your approach versus Silas level 2. And we got into the details about how we can maybe use minions to block E2 damage, or maybe what we can do with the wave, and really got into the specifics of this matchup. And the overwhelming vibe that I get from a lot of these players, not all of them, but I'll say a lot of them, is that it's like, oh, is that it? Is that the learning? Or is that all I can take away from this? And I'm like, yeah, this is the game of League of Legends. The game of League of Legends is that you're going to have tons and tons and tons of small but important pieces of information that we're going to accrue over time that allow us to have consistency in our gameplay. If you don't know how to verse Silas, this is huge. This is massive learning, right? Now you know next time when you verse Silas, where to direct your attention, what you should be looking to anticipate, how the matchup should be going, and what your mindset should be like. This is important shit. Like, this is big shit here. And so I think that if you find yourself feeling frustrated that, I just didn't know how that worked, and you don't feel satisfied from that, well, you got to really question your approach to League of Legends, because this is the game. I love this stuff. You got to learn to love this stuff. There is no two ways about it. This is how you're fundamentally going to climb in League of Legends, and don't shy away from very specific pieces of, especially champ-specific pieces of information. So I guess my advice here for this one, guys, would be if you feel like you take a really bad trade or you get caught off guard by something, ask yourself this: if I were them, what would I do? Or if I were them, why would I go for this? What is it that I fundamentally didn't understand about that champion's kit? And if you can answer that question, you can go through that thought process, you're going to get a hell of a lot of learning. And this is really going to fill those gaps in the knowledge that you're really missing and add to your consistency. So the fourth observation is players not really understanding how resource management and resets go hand in hand. Now, I've noticed this form of recurring problem inside the program where certain clients are getting into these awkward scenarios characterized by getting stuck in lane with no mana, getting stuck in lane with a lot of gold, getting stuck in lane with no TP. The list goes on. Inevitably, they feel trapped, begin losing pressure, feel like a victim within the game of League. Now, I've realized that the underlying core reason that they're in these situations is that they don't really know how to keep track of or ration their resources. So I actually made a video for this for my MLS program. This is actually inside the resources section. So I'm actually just going to put in this video for you guys that I shared with my MLS members. So take a look. Hopefully this will answer this question if you feel as though you have this problem as well. Hey everyone inside the MLS, I wanted to do a bit of a deep dive into resets because I've noticed time and time again within the coaching sessions and inside the VOD questions channel that people are really struggling with resource management and resets and how these concepts tie together. So I'm going to go through a few examples and using a metaphor help you guys develop a more nuanced, sophisticated approach to this, I guess, important aspect of the game. Now, I want you guys, let's start high level. resetting. Why do we reset? Like, what is the intention of, or what does a good quality reset allow us to do, right? And so, really, at the crux of it, there are two things that resetting allows us to do. We are able to replenish resources, which is super important, both HP and mana, and we are able to spend gold. Okay, and we need to be able to do both of these to have pressure on the map, impact on the map, be able to attend skirmishes, take good quality trades, do everything. Everything revolves around having our resources available and actually spending our gold so we can actually be strong. Okay, now, so you may reset because you're low, or you may need to reset because you have a lot of gold. You may not be low, but you just have a lot of gold in your inventory. So we need to factor in both of these variables when we're considering resetting. But the way I want to view it is that you don't just randomly go from not thinking about your resets to instantly thinking about resets. It's always something that should be running in the background, kind of like a hidden program in the back of your mind. And I want to share this metaphor that hopefully gets across this point. Let's say, for example, and I apologize to the Americans for this one, we're going to be using kilometers, not miles. But you get the point. Let's say I'm going on a road trip, right? And I know that I'm going to have to travel pretty far away. Let's say I'm going to have to travel 100 kilometers. Okay, pretty long way. And I know that, when I start my road trip here, I check my fuel gauge on my car, and I know that I'm on 50% fuel, which means so I've got, plenty of time. I can drive a long way, but given that this is a long distance, I need to start thinking, okay, I've got half my fuel tank. Should I fill up now and go a bit higher? Or maybe, maybe there's a fuel station somewhere along the way and I can fill up there. We don't get to this point and realize, we don't start driving and be like, and realize you're low and then be like, oh yeah, I guess I need some fuel. No, that's not the way we think about it. We need to think about our fuel in advance so that we can actually plan out when we're going to go and get some fuel, because we don't want to be stuck in between two places where there's no fuel station and there's no petrol station to actually refuel our car, because then we're screwed. Right? What the hell are we going to be doing? We're going to be conked out on the side of the road, right? And this is what we see here with Unity in this scenario, where she's in the middle of the lane, no TP, no mana, and now we're like, I need to get a recall. I've got no mana, but we can't. There is no way to get a good quality recall anymore because we don't have mana. We can't shove our waves out. We have no TP. We're done. All right, we're the equivalent of being conked out on the side of the road with no help. That's what we got right now. And we don't want to inconvenience our jungler, which is the equivalent of calling up your mom or your dad or your friend or your partner saying, hey, can you please bring some petrol down for me? I'm an idiot. I didn't really think about how much fuel I had in my car. We don't want to inconvenience anymore. We don't want our jungler to come and bail us out. We don't want that scenario. Okay, so the reason I use this metaphor, going into some other examples here, if I'm already at half mana, I'm starting to think to myself, okay, I might need to be considering a potential reset soon. Not now, but I'm at least cognizant of my resources available. So I'm not in Unity scenario where I'm in lane, with no mana. So the same goes for HP. If I took a really bad trade and I get chunked here to maybe a quarter HP, I don't allow it to get to the point where I'm really, really low and then think, I should probably reset. No, I need to start thinking now. As soon as I get chunked, I'm thinking, do I have a pot? Okay, if I don't, okay, I probably need to go for a reset. Or maybe I have 2 pots, I don't need a recall. We need to think in advance and trying to at least be somewhat cognizant in the background of how we're managing our resources, and do we have the ability to stay a little bit longer? Do we need to slow down our mana usage? And this is what we call mana rationing, use less abilities for a little bit so I can actually regenerate some mana, so I can actually have adaptability, right? Because I don't want to be, again, in Unity's scenario here where a fight breaks out in the river and I have no mana. So let's say, for example, you don't have TP, and let's say I was getting a little bit low. Let's say I dropped down to 20% because I had to take a trade or something. I might think to myself, okay, I'm 20% right now. I probably need a reset. The next wave's not a cannon. I might actually just auto attack this next wave and maybe use one ability, let my mana bank up a little bit, and then boom, that next wave, use all my mana on that wave with intention to then get a recall. So again, I can actually start to plan and think about how I'm using my abilities or how I'm rationing my mana according to my reset as long as I've got that underlying mindset in the back of my mind. And this is especially the case when you do not have TP available, you've already used it, because we don't have that oh shit mechanism, right, with the TP. So there's that factor. Okay, so this is all about resources. So going back to the initial point, right, we reset for two reasons. The first is replenishing our resources, and the second is for actually spending gold, right? We need to spend gold, okay? Now, where are we? Now, the second aspect, spending gold. The same thing applies. The exact same concept applies. So here, this was a scenario where I'm doing this review. Can't remember his name. It was today, Cow for Chow. That will do. Nice little name there. And he was in a scenario. We go back here. He's got a beautiful slow build here. And he's actually got pickaxe gold in base after this wave, right? This is a great reset. Stars aligned. You've got the slow build in, your jungler's in base. We can get a reset. We can spend our gold. What I've noticed a lot of people do is they're not even aware of the amount of gold. So that they stick around and they're like, oh, yeah, okay, I can just stay. And then they stay, and then they stay, and then they stay. And they get themselves to a situation like this where, you know, they keep staying, they keep staying, they keep staying. They're at 1100, 1200, 1300. And because they've stayed for so long, if a fight happens into the river, they're now attending that fight with 1300 gold in their back pocket. This is a disaster. The only reason they're in this scenario is because they're not thinking, I have a reset window here. I've actually got a decent amount of gold. I can get a component. I'm going to quickly snag a recall. And this ties into that. It's kind of like the inverse of the previous metaphor, right? So it's kind of like the less gold you have is the equivalent of having a full fuel tank. It's like, a full fuel tank. I don't need to think about it that much. If I'm on 300 gold, who gives a shit? I can't buy much anyway. Even on 400 gold, whatever. Okay, I'm starting to get it up to maybe to 500, 600 gold. I need to start considering, okay, that's a decent amount of gold. Is that, you know, what component am I going for? What's my next spike? You know, what's a good or convenient or nice reset for me to get? Do I want to get 800 for Sorks here? Do I want to stay for 1200 to get Lost Chapter? Do I want to get my Dirk here or Caulfield's pickaxe? Okay, but I'm starting to at least think about it or at least recognize the amount of gold in my inventory. And so I start to get higher, I start to get 700. And as soon as you start to get to around 800, between 800 to 1000, you should already have a pretty clear idea about what you're aiming for and why you're actually staying in the lane. You don't want to be put in this scenario where you've missed your recalls, you're now sitting on lane, for a shit ton of gold unnecessarily without intention, and so therefore when shit hits the fan and there's a grubs fight, there's an invade or there's a roam or there's a skirmish, you don't want to be stuck there with your hands between your feet trying to attend a fight with 1200, 1300 gold in your back pocket, because it's not a great. That will make you feel like a much less impactful player in solo queue. Now, there is one last thing that I want to talk about here in regards to resets. So, look, I wasn't going to initially cover this in this video, but I thought that why not? Some of you guys are pretty switched on. Some of you are pretty switched on. Bit of a jab at some of you MLS members. But yeah, for those of you who want to take your resets to the next level, there's another layer. And this third layer is convenience. Right, and again, I want to use this metaphor, and I'm probably stretching the metaphor a little bit. You're probably all rolling your eyes by now and thinking, Curtis, just hang up your boots. You've used this metaphor too much. But what my point here is that, let's say there is a fuel station and you're sitting at half fuel. Right? And you're like, you know what? I'm hungry. I could actually fill my fuel up now and get it to full or 3/4, and then also grab some lunch while I'm here, because there's a Macca's here as well. I can just grab Macca's. Or, you know what? I could actually just, and it's pretty convenient, right? If I'm hungry and I got to get lunch anyway, I might as well just fill up with fuel now. Or you might think, you know what? I'm lazy. I'm just gonna stay on the road and then get fuel later on. But then you have to stop again, because it's like, well, because I got to stop anyway for lunch, I might as well do 2 in 1, and then I don't need to stop again. And so there's this level of convenience, right? And so tying back to this example here for Cow for Chow, right? What we got is that he got the wave in. He got this beautiful slow build. This is an amazing situation to be in, right? Like, you've got the great slow build as an Ethereal. You could reset, you could get your Dirk. And yeah, sure, it would be nice maybe to stay a little bit longer and push it all the way to a Caulfields and go based on 1100 or something. You could do that. You don't have to reset here, right? We have plenty of resources. But the sheer convenience of resetting now, trumps staying for longer. You know what I mean? Because now we've already got the slow build. If I reset now, I can actually walk back. I don't even need to use my TP. Why not? Instead, this player, what he does, he's thinking, okay, I might want to go for Caulfield, sticks around, and then is in this sort of scenario. Now it's much harder to get a recall because, we can't slow build again. We're not going to have enough resource. We don't have that lane control. And now it just makes the lane a lot more complicated than it needs to be. So it's not that this is necessarily game losing, but we're just, I think, making it, a little bit more awkward. Sometimes if there's just a quick, convenient reset, just take it. If I have a free opportunity to spend my gold, just do it. So I think there's that third layer of convenience and, I guess, adapting to free resets, if you will. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight into getting better quality resets and the mindset behind resets. And because this is definitely something I've noticed inside the coaching sessions with you guys. So yeah, if you have any questions about this, let me know and I'll be floating around the Discord. Cheers, guys. So the fifth and final observation is that players tend to overforce roams and not value or undervalue their XP and gold, right? Now, I've noticed this stems from two underlying fears or potential misconceptions. The first misconception is that I feel like people feel they need to do something massive and roam around the map and get all these kills to win games of League of Legends. They feel like if you're not roaming or you're not helping your bot lane or your top lane or doing something crazy and big, then you're not going to win. You're not going to carry. The game's going to feel out of your control and you're just going to lose. So this is obviously BS. I'll talk about this in a second, but that's the first one. The second one is that I feel like people, when they get roamed on, right? When the enemy mid laner that you're versing roams around the map, they feel like they need to counter respond with a big roam of themselves or do something big to, I guess, make up for that. This is also a misconception. The reality that I see is that most roams below Platinum are very inefficient and quite honestly, game losing. So let's actually get into some examples here. So this is an awesome clip, guys, because I think this exemplifies perfectly the problems that I see with roaming in my below Plat program. So we're going to be looking at this from multiple perspectives. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Essentially, to give the context here, we're playing Vex. This was a bronze Vex review. This Vex happened to get solo killed very early onto the game by an Echo. Now this Echo took Ignite, solo killed this Vex. Now we're in a situation where the Vex TP'd back, has a little bit of tempo over the Echo. Okay? Now the only context we need to know at this exact point is that this next wave is already basically here, right? The next wave is already basically at this tier 1. So somebody keep in mind. So the Vex feels like in this situation that she has to go roam because her team is getting killed. They're nice and low. We can pick up a kill. That would seem cool, right? Surely this is a great roam window. But we get here, we get the kill, and now we're kind of engaged in a bit of a fight with Warwick. So we can't go back mid right now. We're screwed. We have to just run out towards this top tower here. And then we're in a bit of trouble. So we have to disengage. Gwen tries to help us out here a little bit. And now Echo, what the hell? A wild Echo comes here as well. Okay. And so we narrowly escape. Turns into an absolute fiesta. And, absolute disaster on both sides. So let's really get into the complexity here because this is really, really great. Now, let's take a look at the waves here. We're going to freeze roam right here. Excuse the quality of the VOD. The VOD's not the greatest quality. Echo's on mid-wave already. Echo has a lot of wave clear. So Echo can theoretically just shove out these waves and deny us a lot of XP and gold. Okay? So, if Echo plays this properly, if Echo just shoves out that wave mid and doesn't roam, Echo would be so far ahead, it would not even be funny. Vex is out of the game. If we get this kill right now on Alawi, and we commit to this roam, we're done. The game is over. Because what's going to happen, right? Echo would be shoving this next wave out. We would lose all of this under the tower. We'd probably lose a plate. We'd probably lose the next wave as well. Because think about it. We can't walk back mid. We don't have TP, right? We can't just stroll back here, right? We can't just base and TP. We have nothing. So what's going to happen in reality is that Echo would be basically already on our tower by now. Warwick would prevent us from walking back mid. So we would have to start our recall here for 8 seconds, heal back up in base, walk back. The game's over. One roam, right? We are now out of the game if the Echo plays it properly. But what happened? This Echo can't help himself. This Echo also sees a roam. He has to help his team. He has to go in. And as a result, look at this. Look at all this farm that Echo's not getting mid. Now this wave is slow building out. Echo's going to be losing, a decent amount of farm here as well. and because he didn't fully shove it out. And so only because Echo goes for the counter roam here that we're still in the game. Now it's actually good for us because Echo is not shoving out that wave. And so this is a classic example of kind of, it's like, you know, in a rude way, Dumb and Dumber. One person goes for a roam and then the other person feels like they need to go for a counter roam. What I always say, guys, is why the hell are we roaming at level 4, you know, in this really committal fashion? Sure, you can hover. You know, you might hover here, and if you can get a really easy, quick, non-committal kill and then come back mid, sure, thumbs up, that would be great. But we can't put ourselves in a position where we can't go back mid because we got to know, we got a wave we're going to have to respond to soon. Gold and XP, and especially XP, is so important. The amount of games you will lose by doing these sorts of roams where you're going to be missing many waves in your lane is unbelievable. Okay, so the question that you guys got to ask yourself before you're going to a roam, or the variables that you need to consider before you're going to a roam, is if I shove my wave out, where's the next wave? How much am I going to lose for going for this? The more, say the further away this next wave is, the more time you have to roam, right? If this wave hadn't even spawned yet, so this next wave here was coming out of base now, then we would have a lot of time. We could actually maybe go top, snag a kill, reset, come back, and maybe we wouldn't miss too much. But because the next wave is already here now, we don't have any time at all. So in this scenario, the only roam that I would do is I would hover over here, get to about here. If I can snag a quick kill over the wall and then come back mid, then I might do that. But nothing more than that because I can't afford to get zoned and lose all this farm mid. So this was an example later on in this game where the Echo made a similar mistake. Now in this scenario, there was like a river skirmish happening. Vex decided not to go, stick to his reference points because he doesn't have R, right? As a Vex, we don't want to play without our R. So as a result, he just shoves in the wave. Echo goes to this play, and instead of compensating and going for some silly roam without R, or instead of roaming topside, we just shove mid and we get plates. Now, as a result, we see this sort of scenario where now Echo is now 24 CS by 8 minutes. We're 51. I mean, if we never roamed in the first place and whatever, I mean, it'd be different, right? Because Echo probably wouldn't have roamed either. But my point being is that you commonly see these scenarios where people's farm is so abysmally low from these silly roams when in reality, they're just losing the game from over roaming. So then what's my advice off these clips? Well, my advice would be focus on your wave states, gold, and XP. And if opportunistic roam situations present themselves where you can get there, you can get the kill and get back to mid, or maybe you have TP so you can make the play base TP back mid, sure, great. But really focus on getting your waves first. You shouldn't be ditching multiple waves to go for roam plays. And if the enemy does roam, don't panic, get your wave out, keep calm, relax, collect your farm, and do your job. If you're collecting your waves, 9 times out of 10, an opportunity will present itself for you to come back in the game later on. So hopefully you learned a thing or two in this video. If you're interested in getting a little bit more in depth and wanting to streamline your journey to platinum, check out my mid lane school program. I've made it nice and affordable for people, only $15 a month if you want handmade guides, fundamentals, content directed on streamlining this journey. Please check it out. Link will be in the description below.